I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This week I'm talking to Dr Lionel Smith, horticulture lecturer and author of the book Tapestry Lawns, Freed from Grass and Full of Flowers. As the title suggests, a tapestry lawn replaces grass with flowering dicots, increasing biodiversity, lowering maintenance needs and seriously upping the aesthetic value of a lawn. If you've never encountered one before, I'd encourage you to visit the link in the show notes and have a browse through the gallery on the Grass Free Lawns website so that you can get a feel for just how stunning and diverse these lawns can be. Living with a tapestry lawn involves a little bit of self-education around how you treat plants. And I start by asking how to overcome one of my own biggest worries about having one. I was going to start actually by asking you if you could talk about the history of lawns, because you mentioned in the book, and this struck a chord with me as a gardener and in particular as a flower lover, that people actually didn't mind walking on flowery lawns in the past. And that actually horrified me, the thought of people walking on my plants. So maybe you could kind of talk about, historical ideas of what it was okay to trample over.
Well, the first thing I can say to you, you're not alone in your reticence to go walking on flowers. One of the biggest things I noticed, especially early on in the research and subsequent to it, when I was down at Reading University doing the research on the early lawns, and subsequent to all of the new, much larger lawns that we've created, is that people tend to stand around the edges of it and look. And there's something about seeing maybe 10,000 plants in flower that just doesn't ring true with people. You know, your grandfather, grandma has always said, don't walk on the flowers. You've always walked around the borders in parks. You walk around the plants. However, if you come to a normal lawn, let's say a normal British lawn, a standard one that hasn't been sort of kept to Cambridge University standards or anything, you'll find there's daisies and buttercups and dandelions and clover and self-heal and all kind of bits and pieces. And we have no trouble walking on those. It's just when it becomes a feature that you immediately seem to classify it in your head in a slightly different way. And especially if there are lots of flowers, you tend to be very reticent to walk on it. Now, one of the joys that I've had many times now is actually giving permission to people to walk on all of these plants. Some won't, some just won't do it. It's a small minority, but you find that when anyone does step onto it and then takes a few more steps, they begin to actually kind of go, oh, right, okay. And they overcome this barrier, and it was a self-imposed barrier. The most enlightening experience that I've had, if I could just mention that one, was with children. There's where I work at the moment, Myerscough College, there is a little nursery for staff and local people. And the kids wander around, and they're very young. They're sort of under 8. And they keep staring, and they respond to the way people behave to this lawn. So the people sort of standing around the edges, they'll do the same thing because that's what the adults are doing. And I bumped into them one day, all walking around with their carers, and I said, come and look at this lawn, what do you think? And they stood around it. Oh, it's really, really, really pretty. And I said, walk on it and rub your hands on it because you can smell it and things. There's lots of different smells. And if anyone can find me a 4-leaf clover, there's a reward for you. And they went, can we go on it? Can we go on it? And it was like, yes, of course you can go on it. I want you to go on it. Well, they dived on it. It was like going into a swimming pool for them. And they were on their hands and knees crawling around and rubbing things. Going, oh, this smells like mint. This is chewing gum smelly and da-da-da-da. And then they were finding 4-leaf clovers. Going, oh, my dad's going to want this for the lottery today. And all of these little things that they were doing. And they've subsequently fallen in love with it. It's become their favorite place to sit. However, they're not allowed to nowadays because they have to cross a road. It's where the buses go around. So they're discouraged from going across the road to do it. But you can see them looking longingly, and they very much like it. So I think it's a self-imposed thing. I'm rambling forward here, but it's very much a self-imposed restriction to walk on flowers. And certainly our ancestors never had that problem, because they would go out harvesting all of these things and throw them on their floors to keep away nasty pests and to make the houses smell nice. So they were very used to walking on and laying on and doing all kinds of other things. I don't know whether you'd want to broadcast this or not, but just telling you, but you can tell your listeners if you would like, they're saying that people would do other things on lawns. And we put together with Kensington and Chelsea in London the sort of first public tapestry lawn in Avondale Park there. And it's a park that gets closed at night. It's got gates. And I came back one day because I was having a look at seeing how it was developed with the ecology services manager there at the time. And we were wandering the lawns first thing in the morning, and we found a pair of pink fluffy handcuffs. Somebody had come into the park during the night, and of all the places to choose, they'd chosen this scented floral lawn to have a bit of fun. And I must admit, it amused the hell out of me. It really, really did. You put things together sometimes, you do a bit of research and come up with something sort of garden-esque, and the results can be quite extraordinary. That's I'm not alone with more stories of a similar nature, but perhaps more moving and less handcuff-based.
Well, I mean, yeah, why not? I suppose it's an experience.
Well, you might want to take a partner of a lovely moonlit evening onto a beautiful lawn covered with flowers and richly scented with chamomile and things. Midnight picnic, that sort of thing. Well, obviously somebody has.
Obviously. Well, yeah, I didn't expect that benefit with them. So that's another
That's a little
point.
known story, that one. But I mean, I'm fine with it. Anyone with the world can know.
Awesome. Well, I think they'll enjoy it. So thinking about kind of lawns versus tapestry lawns.
Yes.
It's probably very difficult to define what makes a traditional lawn, but if you could broadly, how does a traditional lawn vary from the tapestry lawn?
Oh, I would say it's really quite simple, the distinction between the two. Traditional lawns really have only become traditional since the 40s, to be quite honest. Before that, they were all kinds of grasses with all kinds of wildflowers growing in them, because there was no way really to stop those from coming unless you had specific gardeners to do the job and keep digging out the dandelions. So it was very much a multi-species thing. Then comes along the first broadleaf herbicide in the 40s, which you can spray on your lawn and it kills all the broadleaf weeds. The dandelions go, the clover goes, the daisies go, and it's just left with grass. And we have been brought up from childhood knowing this type of lawn, although probably most of us have got slightly more weed-spattered lawns than that. And my approach was just very simply to look at that and say, well, the dominant plant here is grass. Why are we doing this with grass? What happens if we take away the dominant competitor, the grass? What would happen? And we only had the broadleaves. I couldn't find anything that would suggest the result of that. People just thought, well, it's a bunch of weeds, nobody'd be interested anyway. So with the tapestry lawn, I thought, well, we can get pink-flowered daisies, we can get white-flowered buttercups, we can get red-leaved clovers. Let's use some of the horticultural variants, let's put them all together and see what happens. First of all, is it possible? Will it look stupid? Or will it turn into something a little bit more interesting? So the real distinction between the traditional lawn, which is with grass as the dominant plant and competitor, to a tapestry lawn where it's the non-grasses that are the dominant, and all you have to do really to maintain that is just keep an eye on it and remove bits of grass as it turns up.
So why would that be preferable to people? Is it the flowers, or are there other benefits as well?
I think that personally, so it's coming from me, so I would say something more positive, I suppose, but it really has an enormous number of positive benefits over and above that you might find in a normal lawn. I mean, it retains all of the benefits of a traditional lawn, but we add to it the fact, for a start, you don't need to mow it quite as much. Now, you mow a normal lawn, maybe, depending on how you look after your lawn, if you're obsessive, maybe 3 times a week, more likely perhaps once a fortnight, just to keep it low. Well, when you're using just the dicots, the non-grasses, you only really need to mow it about 3 to 5 times a year. Now, that in itself is a lot less labour. But more than that, it means you're using a lot fewer resources. You know, you're not using a lot more petrol to mow the thing or use electricity and things like that. So it reduces the energy input necessary. Another one is, because you're using dicots and they flower, you produce a pollen and nectar resource, which is very rare in a highly managed lawn. So suddenly your lawn changes from being a green desert into a feasting table for pollinators. Not only that, because you're using so many different species in it, all different types of flowering plants that can withstand mowing, you get a structural change. Instead of the sort of carpet-like structure that you might find in a normal grass lawn, you get a very dense and multifaceted structure to the lawn, which becomes a very good habitation for all kinds of insects. The researchers we took it's effectively a scientific vacuum cleaner out and sucked up loads of insects and things to find out the differences. And the variety and number of insects that you can find living in a tapestry lawn is over and above that you would find in a normal grass lawn. You don't need to do things like scarify it, because you just shred it to bits, so you don't have to go out and scarify the lawn to get moss off. And the interesting thing is, moss is quite rare in a tapestry lawn. I'm not sure why that is at the moment. It does show from time to time, especially in really wet weather for weeks and weeks. But otherwise, it doesn't seem to show up. So you don't need to sort of go around getting rid of moss. Another thing is, because when you use grasses, they've got very fibrous roots, so they kind of make a thatch layer, and it's quite a thick, strong layer just at the surface. When you're using many different forms of dicots, the non-grasses, their root structures are very different. Some of them go quite deep, like you might think of a dandelion goes very, very deep. Some of them go sideways. Some of them have thick roots. Some of them have thin roots. Some of them make associations with bacteria. So you get a very rich root structure subsurface. And one thing that's become very clear over the few years that we've had tapestry lawns is that drainage is substantially improved because of that. You don't get flooded grass lawn things, it's the same kind of thing as a flooded grass lawn on a tapestry lawn, or very rarely anyway. The drainage is much, much better. You don't need to throw in fertilizers to green up your lawn, because the diversity of the plants usually includes legumes such as clovers and things, and that seems to have a natural supply of nitrogen, because each time you mow a tapestry lawn, it kills a bit of the clover, it chops bits off, so a little bit of the nitrogen is released via the roots because the plant doesn't need it anymore. So it's all around, it's a massive move from trying to keep something in a very fixed way, like the grass lawn, and one species, to a very rich, multi-species and multifaceted type of lawn. It really is something. I'm learning all the time. It's one of those things. The longer we have tapestry lawns, the more I learn. But yes, many different advantages. Anyway,
definitely. You talked about mowing and the fact that it needs mowing less often. One of the other things I think that, as a flower lover, I kind of shivered at a little bit when I read it was the fact that you have to mow it when it's at a certain stage of growth. which would involve decapitating many of the flowers. Is that do you find that's a hurdle for people sometimes?
It's usually a hurdle for people the very first time they have to do it. It's effectively deadheading on a grand scale. That's all we're really doing. We, as gardeners and horticulturists, are very familiar with the concept of deadheading to continue and increase flowering over a period of time. And that's what we are generally doing with a tapestry lawn, because the plants, you get very low growing plants and you'll get much taller plants growing at the same time. The only way you can make a low-growing plant and a tall plant coexist is to chop the tall plant, and that's what the mower does. So it continually reduces the size of the tall plants and allows the low-growing plants and the tall plants to coexist. So you do need to mow. And that will mean that anything that's got to that sort of height where mowing is triggered, which is usually when the lawn itself has got a bit taller than your foot, if you put your boot in it and things are showing over the top of your boot, then it's the time to mow it. It will just deadhead it. But that also allows for a different set of flowers to come. For example, the ones that occur very low to the ground, like some of the lawn lobelias, don't show themselves very clearly if they're overtopped by clover. So when you come along with the mower and you chop the clover right back down, lo and behold, hidden beneath it are all these little blue lawn lobelia flowers or something, revealing a whole new range of flowers. And as we all know, because we've all mown lawns, I'm sure, clover comes back really quickly. So it's not a problem. It's a cyclical approach. Just keep coming back, keep mowing, and as a result, more plants can live together and you get more and more flowers. It's not the other way around, where because you mow it, you're reducing your flower number. In fact, you tend to encourage further flowering over time.
Well, that's good to know. And talking about mowing as well, I know in your book that you mentioned sometimes the problem with mowing is that certain things like to harbour within or under the tapestry lawn canopy. Have you got any top tips for avoiding mowing things that might be living in there, such as amphibians?
Well, usually, and we've encountered amphibians quite a bit where I am at the moment. We've got a number of ponds and it's quite wet. The first thing we notice is amphibians are usually disturbed by the sound of the mower. And usually, if I can, get my whips out, I get the students to do the mowing. So the first thing that they all tend to do is you start up your mower, and we have a full range of mowers. Students at the college must learn to use electric and petrol and all kinds of weird and wonderful mowing devices. And you just make the noise. You start it and let it run. And usually that seems to alert everything in the lawn, and it seems to have two responses. One is to try and move out, the other one is to hunker down. So if you just move slowly, usually anything will move in front of you. It's not really the kind of thing that you would possibly want to use a sit-on mower for, unless you've got an enormous estate and you can afford such a thing. But otherwise, no, I'm afraid I don't have any special tips. But we've never found so far. I've not found at all any mashed amphibians anywhere, or anything else for that matter.
Well, I am very pleased to hear that, because I'm a big fan of frogs and toads, so that's great news.
Indeed, me too, very much, especially frogs. I would actually on the side of toads. I've no idea why, but that may just different forms of the same thing, really.
I guess so. So also you mentioned in your book, and you don't need to sort of go into this too much in depth, but I just thought it was a really interesting concept, and that's the one of height convergence and why it's relevant to tapestry lawns. It's a feature I've noticed, not going into too much detail. It's one of those surprising things you'd never notice or would never expect until you do something. It's one of those little sort of scientific bonuses when observing something closely. What I did notice is in the mown tapestry lawn, when you're mowing, plants will adapt to it. It's almost as if they think they're being eaten by a herbivore.
So the way to avoid a herbivore tends to be to change your growth shape. So instead of growing upwards to be easily munchable, you tend to grow sideways. Makes it harder for the herbivore to chomp on you. And after you've mown a tapestry lawn a few times, usually 2 or 3 times, the plants sort of have changed their shape a little bit. And when they grow slightly more outward and upward rather than totally upward. A result of this is that you do get a canopy. And it's almost as if the plants have some kind of agreement. They all sort of, as they grow, go, well, we're all after a bit of sunshine, we're all after a bit of water and a bit of nutrient. And we're in an environment where something comes along and keeps chopping us. So what we're all going to do is very carefully just get a little bit taller and wait and see if we're going to get chomped, and then wait a little bit more and we're getting chomped. And they do it almost at the same rate. One is really scared to get taller than the other, because then it will become very visible and might get eaten. Now, that is a completely non-ecological way of describing it, and any ecologists listening are going to be horrified at me for that description. But that seems to be the way it is. And everything grows roughly at the same height and speed for quite a while. As soon as you start to see these emergence, suddenly something will go, right, that's it, I want to flower now, or stick up a flower spike.
It's very good of them to be that well behaved as well, and to recognise that they're in an environment where they really should kind of be aping a lawn to a degree. It's very cooperative.
Yes, it's as if they've got brains. Of course, they don't think, and they don't chat with each other. But that's just a sort of way I'm trying to explain the unusual behaviour. You don't seem to get quite as much hummocking in a tea lawn as I would have expected.
Yeah.
It tends to be quite level as it grows back for a while. And it's usually just before you have to mow it again that it starts to change its form and get a little bit uneven.
We spoke about the amphibians, and we spoke about bees visiting the flowers. How good are tapestry lawns for wildlife?
We did a study on pollinators. It's yet to be published, although I do mention it in the book. It may well be published. It just needs a bit of a revision, apparently. We compared what would be a normal lawn with something called a flower lawn, which is a kind of lawn with grasses and has other plants in it which do flower, and a tapestry lawn. And fundamentally, we discovered you're going to get 80 times more visits from pollinators than you are on a tapestry lawn than you are on a grass lawn. The insect variety is so sufficiently different, it increases the overall biodiversity of an area. And we've found, just by observation without proper study, all kinds of creatures seem to enjoy our lawns. Lots of birds, in particular, seem to like hunting around them. One for the plants, because the pigeons will eat the clovers. But you get lots of blackbirds and various other smaller birds, too, just rooting around for the life that's in the lawn. Hedgehogs do seem to like perusing it of an evening. I've actually heard them like while it's singing, because they make some strange noises sometimes when they're wandering around the tea lawn. As well as the amphibians that seem to like the structure of it. Rabbits, bizarrely enough, seem to like it a lot, although I suspect just because they like a scented latrine more than anything else. But larger, I haven't actually noticed any deer or any such things on them. But generally speaking, certainly if you could sit and watch a normal grass lawn and look at the life on it compared to what's going on a tea lawn, you'll notice a very significant difference.
I'm just hoping that the human animals that appreciate it don't happen to come across one of those hedgehogs.
Well, I think they disappear. I think they disappear in the mornings. I've only ever seen them there in the evenings. I did want to have a look at the moths that turn up at night, but I never got round to that particular experiment.
I bet they attract a load of those. What happens to them over winter? Do they still look as nice?
They become multi-tonal is the best way to describe it, because each plant species responds differently to the changing temperatures. Some plants disappear entirely, they're herbaceous. Others will sort of slightly go reddish, browny purple because of the change in temperature and the fact that the composition of chemicals in their leaves changes and responds to the changing temperatures. There's not very much growth, but if it's grown well during the year, you don't tend to notice anything other than a very multi-tonal, non-growing lawn. It's one of the joys, to be quite honest, is I was expecting there maybe bare patches and all kinds of sort of unpleasantness might take place in a tea lawn because nobody'd ever put one together. And every year, no, we don't have any of that. Never had a winter problem with a tea lawn. Always maintains a reasonable amount of coverage, don't see very much bare soil, doesn't get waterlogged, and is just really waiting for the spring and the first flowers, which will turn up with the violets, usually in February.
I genuinely am sold. I am going to try growing one. But where might I source plants for one?
There's an interesting question in itself. I have sourced all of my plants from British growers one way or another. It will be local nurseries, garden centres, or seed from seed catalogues. It's just a matter of getting the plants that you wish to use as many species as you possibly can, and start from there. Yes, that's probably the best way to do it. There has been a lot of queries and questions on, isn't it possible to roll one out? Can't I just buy one ready-made? And that's been a little bit difficult. I know before we got talking, I did mention that I'd had a little bit of a health issue for a year. That was when I was trying to work on the idea of possibly putting together like a ready-made form or ready grown tiles for the lawn, but that got interrupted, so it's not currently available sort of like to buy at your local garden centre yet. It's very much a case of something you might have to do for yourself, but quite a lot of people have done that. I mean, quite a lot. I get quite a few emails of people showing me what they've done, and I've even been embarrassed before now by people turning up and saying that they've got one, and I'm going like, well, I don't think you do, and then them showing me a photograph and going, yes, we've been following your work, look, this is our front lawn. You think, oh whoa.
Well, you do give quite good instructions in the book, actually, for anybody who was wanting to start one. So
good.
I think people will definitely experiment.
The more there's a demand, the more likely there is to be a commercial version.
I would say so. Yeah, I'd say that's quite a good business opportunity for anyone who's listening and is a bit savvy. So what does the future hold for tea lawns?
I think that's really down to the general public. I mean, while we've been talking, you've come up with quite a few of the barriers to tea lawns, which is people, say, not wanting to necessarily walk on them or to mow lots of flowers. And the one I've discovered is that people don't really picture it in their heads or fully comprehend it until they're right next to one and then sitting on one, rubbing it and sniffing their hands, and then lying in one in the sunshine with all the flowers around them and things, and then deciding that, you know what, this is really amazing and wonderful. So it's getting people's head away from the concept that a lawn must be grass and into a very different 21st century approach that is, ecologically minded and uses a bit of science to create. So the future, I would say, is possibly bright, but within horticulture, everything goes via seasons and years. So it's going to be a slow process. But my ideal fantasy would be to walk down a street one day and just see tapestry lawn after tapestry lawn after tapestry lawn, because I'm sure I would hear it with all the pollinators and the chuckling of kids as they look for bubblegum scented plants in the lawn.
That is a lovely vision for the future. But I found myself asking, why does it have to be the future? And why does so much of gardening involve clinging on to outdated and redundant expressions of empire and dominion, of humans as separate from and superior to all other species? Well, it shouldn't. And we need to make that change right now. No more excuses. Let's get those tapestry lawns into gardens up and down the country and make flowers the norm instead of high maintenance, low biodiversity squares of green. Okay, I'm dismounting my soapbox. Thank you to Dr Lionel Smith for taking part in the interview, and I know I'm a book pusher, but if you don't already have this book, it is a great one to add to your collection. But be warned, once you read it, you'll be wanting to put tapestry lawns all over the place. Thank you for listening, and a big thank you to Sally Bauer, who's a great supporter of the podcast and who suggested I get the book and interview Dr Smith. Although I'm a massive book pusher myself, some of you get in touch and suggest books to me that I can't resist getting, so you are getting your revenge to the point that I've actually had to build up into the rafters in my tiny house to house them. I'll leave you with Dr Ian Bedford talking about a creature that, in contrast with last week's bug, you'll probably be actively encouraging into your gardens, and that can, without doubt, be found in great quantities on a tapestry lawn.
I'm sure that many of us who welcome wildlife to our gardens will have planted at least one buddleia bush for the butterflies. Although commonly called the butterfly bush, the buddleia isn't actually much help for our short-tongued butterfly species, who are unable to access the nectar deep within its flowers. It is, however, perfect for the long-tongued butterflies, which includes a number of our most colourful species, such as the peacocks, small tortoiseshells, commas, red admirals, and also the stunning painted lady, a butterfly whose enigmatic life story has only recently been fully understood. For the many centuries that butterflies have been studied, it was a known fact that none of the life stages of the painted lady were able to survive through a British winter, and that the butterflies seen here each year from late spring onwards have migrated from Europe, sometimes arriving in cloud-like swarms of many thousand individuals. Once here, the butterflies would re-energise on nectar, then disperse to mate and lay their eggs on thistles, nettles and malva. Over the following weeks, the resulting caterpillars would then develop into the next generation of adult butterflies, which would become regular visitors to our gardens throughout the summer. But then, as summer drew to an end, these beautiful butterflies all disappeared, almost overnight. And each year, despite many hypotheses, nobody really knew how, or indeed where, they had gone. Recently, though, this mystery of the vanishing painted ladies has finally been solved, and has uncovered a truly astonishing annual migratory cycle. Using radar, scientists tracked the movements of the painted ladies that had hatched in the UK, and watched as they disappeared at the end of the summer. They found that over a very short period of time, the butterflies headed north, towards the Arctic Circle, before ascending to heights of up to 3,000 feet. They then fluttered an incredible 2,500 miles south to North Africa, from where they produced their next generation. These fresh new painted ladies then began the journey north again, which through successive generations would find them arriving in our gardens again the following spring. Remarkably, this delicate insect is the longest continuously migrating butterfly ever recorded in the world, and it's here in our gardens each year.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps, and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.